Welcome to Bookies Talk on the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast. I'm Erica O'Rourke, one of the readers advisors here at the library, and I am joined today by my colleague Hannah Dove, who is the staff member in charge of one of our most exciting projects.
I am excited to have the honor to work on the top fiction and nonfiction staff picks of 2023. I compile everyone's beloved books from mysteries to thrillers to nonfiction, investigative journalism, and put them all in one place for patrons to peruse into the next year.
And those books are popular all year long. It is a big undertaking. What are the titles that you are seeing percolate up as the top books of the year, both in the favorites booklet among our staff and also in the wider reading world?
Among our staff, we have a huge range of reading loves, genres all across the board. But the ones that keep popping up the most is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby, crime thriller. We have The Librarianist by Patrick DeWitt coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Janice Hallett with The Twyford Code. Alex E. Harrow with Starling House.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a lot more horror, a lot more gothic fiction this year, I would say.
Yes.
In the grand reading scheme of things, I think that the big books, the top books of 2023, have repeatedly been The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters, Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, All the Sinners Bleed, as I mentioned, staff favorite, Absolution by Alice McDermott. But the one that comes up on top, I would say, is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride.
Oh, I loved that book. If you haven't read it, it's a story set in Chicken Hill, a small neighborhood that is primarily composed of Black and Jewish families. And this is in the mid-1920s. It starts when a skeleton is unearthed, and that happens in the 70s, and then it jumps back in time to tell the story of how the skeleton ended up where it did. It follows a theater owner and his wife. The wife owns the Heaven and Earth grocery store. They are Jewish, but it is a fixture among the Black members of their community. What I loved about it is the cast of characters is so richly drawn. These are people you will just fall in love with. They are complicated and messy and endearing and infuriating. And the story sort of coalesces around this child that the theater owner and the grocery store owner take in. He is wanted by child services. They want to take him away and put him in an institution, and they help to hide the child. There's this tension throughout the story of what's going to happen, and then the worst happens, and then you realize this is actually a heist story. It left me breathless with anticipation and laughter, so it's a well-deserved accolade.
I cannot agree more. And as we see again and again and again, it's these stories that explore what it means to be human that oftentimes make it out on top, even if they have absurd or wild or creative premises that we wouldn't necessarily see in our day-to-day fiction.
I agree. What was your favorite book of the year?
I would have to say that I've read several good books this year. Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas, Three Fires by Denise Mina, Terrace Story by Hilary Lecter.
Oh, it's so good.
But I would say that my favorite book of this year has been I Am Homeless If This Is Not My Home by Lori Moore. It puts the literary in literary fiction, I would say, but it delves into grief and loss and what does it mean to move on from someone who doesn't necessarily want you to move on from them. We meet our main character visiting his brother who is in hospice, dying of cancer. He gets a call alerting him that his therapy clown ex-girlfriend has unfortunately killed herself, and he is invited to visit her grave, where there she is, a bit decomposing, but they take one final quest together to take her to a body farm in Kentucky. It explores the connections with people, how far they can go, and in the end, it is about letting go, but it's so lyrical, it's so beautifully written, it's so funny in a very dark way, obviously. It's also a relatively short read, and so if you're looking for something to move you, I think this is one of the books of the year to do that.
That sounds incredible. Lori Moore has this long and storied history of just, no pun intended, of writing, as you say, not a long book, but really affecting books. So my favorite for the year, I think, is one that I have not stopped talking about since I read it. So if anybody has spoken to me for longer than about 45 seconds, they've heard me talk about North Woods by Daniel Mason. North Woods is the story of a house in the woods of western Massachusetts, and it starts in the 16th century. There's a Puritan couple fleeing their community, and this is where they find refuge, and they build their home there, and then it follows inhabitants of that house across centuries, all sorts of different characters, all looking for home. It really becomes this story about what makes a home and what is the effect of place on a person. The writing is some of the most beautiful I've read. Daniel Mason just has this incredible eye for writing about the natural world in this very precise and poetic way. It's stunning. So hands down, that was my absolute favorite of the year. And weirdly enough, when I read it, there was a lot of buzz that that was going to be one of the top books of the year. It has not gotten as much buzz as I would have thought, so clearly I am on a mission to single-handedly fix that.
Rest assured that Daniel Mason's, what many people are saying, a masterpiece, has made many a list from all over the internet. And of course, we can always trust what's on the internet.
Absolutely. If it's on the internet, it must be true. All right. You are knee-deep in 2023 books, but have you thought about 2024? Is there anything you're particularly looking forward to?
Absolutely. As I've been investigating what books are coming out in 2024, I think this might be a great year for alternative histories. Coming up, we have Cahokia Jazz by Francis Spufford, who is the award-winning author of Golden Hill, and he's delivering this noirish detective novel set in the 1920s that imagines or reimagines how American history would be different if, instead of being decimated, the indigenous populations had thrived. Cahokia Jazz inhabits a different version of America, a subtly altered 1920s full of fog, cigarette smoke, dubious motives, danger, and dark deeds. I am incredibly excited. It will be coming out February 6th of 2024, so make sure you keep an eye out for it. Coming up, we also have The Extinction of Irina Ray by Jennifer Croft, which comes out March 4th, 2024. 8 translators arrive at a house in a primeval Polish forest on the border of Belarus, which belongs to world-renowned author Irina Ray, and they are there to translate her magnum opus, Grey Eminence. But within days of their arrival, Irina disappears without a trace. They begin to investigate where she may have gone while proceeding with work on her masterpiece. So, a love letter to translation and a mystery. If you enjoy Kelly Link's short stories, she has coming up in February 2024 a full novel, The Book of Love, in which 3 teens come back from the dead, and in order to get back to their lives, they have a series of magical tasks to complete. They cannot tell their families and friends where they have been or what they've been doing, and that, of course, causes a lot of fun issues on its own.
I was actually considering putting that book on my upcoming list as well, so we'll have to, fight for it by the new fiction shelf. I've got 3 that I am looking forward to. My first is a new historical standalone fantasy by Leigh Bardugo called The Familiar, which is set during the Spanish Golden Age. And the thing about Leigh Bardugo is whatever she writes, I'll read it. I don't care what it's about. Like, it's about the tax code? Sure, I will read it because I know that it will be impeccably crafted and completely immersive. I'm sure it's going to be lush and complicated and have that really sly, clever intelligence that her writing always does. That comes out in April. Another one that I'm looking forward to is actually the sequel to The House by the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. The newest one in that universe is called Somewhere Beyond the Sea, and that comes out in September. And T.J. Klune writes these books that are magical and whimsical and charming and so deeply heartfelt. I think people are going to be lining up to read that one, and I'm hoping to be first in line. And lastly, one of my favorite contemporary romance series of the last few years has been Jen DeLuca's Well Met series, which takes place at a Renaissance fair. I thought it was fun and just a really different premise for a romance novel. She's taking a break from that series, though she will go back to it. But her new series, the first one is called Haunted Ever After, and it comes out in August. And it's a romance set in a tourist town in Florida that decides they're going to make their name by advertising themselves as a haunted town. Stories set on the resident side of tourist towns are always so interesting because you get to see what goes into making all that magic happen. And the fact that there's a little bit of a haunted element to it, but knowing Jen DeLuca, it's not going to be scary, that's just icing on the cake. Well, 2023 has been a great reading year. It sounds like 2024 is going to be just as good, if not better. So thank you all for joining us today for a bit of a retrospective and a bit of a look forward. We'll be sure to put links to all of these titles in the show notes, and if you are on the lookout for that favorites booklet, you can find it at either library, or you can find it on our website, and we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. As always, you can find the Bookies on the library's website, Shelf Life the blog, or by emailing us, and you can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends and subscribing wherever you like to listen. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.